Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Community. I am
So excited.
so thrilled to be here with Maria, my business partner, bestie, life partner. We do all things together. It's the best. Hi, Maria.
Hey girl, hey.
This is probably your last task of the day. We have done so much content today under the direction of our artistic director, Ben Burke.
I can't wait to check my body battery after this one.
Me too. My baby's like, let me go.
Let me out of this.
No, we're so thrilled because honestly, like this has been such a great example of kind of what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
Because we have grown our agency quite a bit. We are really on a trajectory that like a little rocket ship, I would say.
Yeah.
We're like
momentum's building.
Yeah, sitting there with our jetpacks. Some months feel way better than others, but we're always kind of growing our business. And something you and I have always been aligned on from day one is hiring people. Mm-hmm. We have never been like, let's do everything so that we can be madly wealthy. We have always been like, okay, if we can bless others and give people opportunity, then not only is that better for you and I because we don't have to actually do the work ourselves, but we also get people who are better at these things than us. And this is such a good example. Ben joined our team this year, and we would never have these content days if it wasn't for him. Like we're always like, we're gonna do so much content, and then we're like, no, there's so many things that come up.
Yeah, there's no time. Where's the time?
Yeah. So that's what we want to talk about today is like, really like kind of the things that we've learned from growing our team and kind of some, mistakes we've made definitely. And also things that we've learned that I think actually other people come to us for and like really emulate and are excited about.
Yeah, I feel like we've learned like a ton in these 3 years on hiring and growing the team, and it's been a bit of a wild ride, but it's been fun. Mm-hmm. And I just think back to I think it was our first mastermind, at least first one in person, where we both left and we were like, are we hiring 2 people? Yeah, we're hiring 2 people. We like left and hired 2 people within like 2 weeks and texted the mastermind group saying like we did it. And we took like a big leap and learned a lot of lessons in that hiring. And I think what I'm hoping to share in this podcast is just some tips of like what went well, what didn't go well, how can people learn from some of our mistakes. Because I think we learned a lot by just doing and trying, and that's all we really knew at the time. And you can get as much advice as you want, but it looks different for every single business. So I think something that's so important to think about when you're thinking about like, do you want to hire, do you want to grow a team, is really like you and your own personal preferences and like, what do you want your lifestyle to look like? How much work do you want to do? How much money do you want to make? Even if, like from the very beginning, like I never saw any other world other than like scaling our agency and making it into like having a big team and making it into this like big thing. And then I remember thinking like once we were like well on our way into that path, like, oh, we could have done this differently also. Like, and that's also an option and that's okay. And so I think it's easy to get kind of caught up sometimes in, oh, everybody says you have to scale and grow and hire and outsource this and outsource that, stay in your zone of genius. And like, there's a lot of like, I don't know, propaganda or whatever messaging around that. Yeah. And I don't necessarily think it has to be like that for everybody. Like it's an option and it's one we took. But I think that would be like my first piece of advice when you're starting out is like thinking about what do you actually want for your life? Do you want to be managing a team? And thinking about your priorities and starting there.
Yeah. I love that. We actually have an episode about scaling simply with Ali Hicks, right? That I really would love to link below. And I encourage you guys to listen to it because big businesses are not for everyone. And things can be big, but like, and big means something different to every person, right? But like we have lots of friends who have businesses where they're like solopreneurs or they have like one other person. Mm-hmm. Like we were actually talking about a YouTuber today who I know also has an agency, and I know because she posts her revenue numbers all the time that her revenue is lower than ours, and she's killing it. Like she is killing it. Mm-hmm. But I know she runs lean, and we've never run lean. That's never been our approach to it. We've always had more people than we've needed. Like we've always probably been like, okay, we should find some work for some of these people, right? But that's always been a mindset thing. But I think that you're right. There's so many different ways that we could do it. And I think one of the first lessons I would say was that our first full-time hire is actually still with us. We love her, and so she's still with us. But you actually don't need to hire people full-time. Yes. And so that's a big thing because full-time employees have like a lot of expenses depending on where you live, but like a lot of expenses that you don't know about until you have them, and then you have them and you're like, wow, You want to go to the dentist, eh? No, it's fine. But it's like, so you really have to be ready to invest in them, right? And it's not only just investing in them like financially and, paying taxes and stuff like that. It's actually also you're investing your time in them, you're managing them, you're like, you're responsible for their livelihood. That is a very different thing than when you work with contractors and people who are self-employed. When people are self-employed, they kind of get it, right? Like if you're like, I don't really need this type of work, I need this, like it's a different feeling. And so like really, I think like for us, we do not hire people full time unless we are like gangbusters. This person's gonna change our business. Like there is no way around it. Mm-hmm. So it's really that's a lesson we learned because we kind of were really like kind of trigger happy with it. We were kind of like, oh yeah, we're gonna hire 2 full-time people. We don't actually know what either of them are gonna do. And it turned out that like both were great fits for our team, but one actually that role didn't need to be a full-time role, and that person actually wasn't even happy working full-time. They were like really creative. They wanted like they're like wanted a digital nomad lifestyle, right? Like that was just that's not a 9 to 5, right? And so us learning that kind of the hard way, but now we're like, okay, we're going to hire someone to do our Dubsado. We're going to pay somebody maybe more than we'd normally pay one of our employees to learn, but they're an expert. They'll get it done quick, and they're a bit of an extension of our team for a bit, and then we move on. Or if we want a website update or something like that, like we're not like becoming web designers,
Yeah, I think that's so important to think about too. Like there are, I think like at least 3 very different ways of getting help, and some have to do with just like what is your preference, but then some roles more naturally make sense for like one of the 3 categories, right? Yeah. So like I think full-time employees is one category, subcontractors is another category, and then like outsourcing projects to someone for like a specific kind of like I'm going to give you X and you're going to give me Y, like hiring someone to build your website or something like that, right? So I think that was also a lesson we learned the hard way, sort of, where we were like, oh, like we need more help in this role. Let's just hire a full-time person. And it turned out that role didn't match well with the full-time 9 to 5 role. You know what I mean? Like they just didn't go together well. So I think that's something really important to think about when you're looking at outsourcing is like, I would be, my advice would actually be like, be hesitant with full-time people because they are a commitment and you're investing a lot in them. And then it's also very different from contractors in the way of like, you have to fill their days with 8 hours worth of stuff to do, and you have to manage them. And like you mentioned, all the costs and things like that. I think there's definitely a place for it. And we love our full-time team members. But be approach it with caution. Yeah. What I would say.
Yeah. Another thing I would say too is that, when you're hiring contractors, just because someone tells you they can do something doesn't mean that they can do it. And I just mean that respectfully, like, and with no examples that will be shared. But, there were a lot of things we invested in that, like, I'm like, I would have loved that cash back. Like, we would be like, we'd be in, like, maybe a jet for like a weekend for sure, or like
at one jet for
a couple days, and like a Cabo yacht for sure. I don't know how we'd rate that off, but we would have figured a way out, I'm sure. Stacey Lauren at Thrive Academy, would she help us? I don't know. But it's more about the fact that like we really trusted people, and even we don't do a lot of reference checks. We weren't like at that season where we were like, oh, like, someone would be like, that person's really great. We'd be like, well, if that person thinks they're really great, they must be really great. And we'd make investments from that place. And now we are so much more cautious with our investments and so much more like, okay, what's the return on that? Like, what do we think is going to work? What don't we think is going to work? Is that worth the risk? That's not worth the risk. Like, so, and with people too, like, there's a lot of ways you can approach working with people that's really win-win. And that's something that's kind of important to us is like, are people willing to do something at a reduced cost because you're the first person they're going to do it with, and you're going to give them a ton of feedback about their process. Because we've also done things, and I'm going to discourage this thing that I'm about to say, it's a hot take. Trades.
Yeah.
Trades are really tough. They're not, I don't think, great on business friendships. We have done a few trades that I regret.
Can you elaborate more on what you think a trade or what is a trade?
Yeah, so it's like when it's like it's bartering essentially. Like you have some apples, someone has some oranges, and you do a trade. But like in our world, right? It's like we would do some on social media or give them a High Five Women sponsorship or something like that, and then they would do something in exchange for us. And sometimes like I would feel like maybe we did more than we could. I've also been on the other side where I don't feel like, I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel like we did as much as that person did, and I feel guilty. I would rather just pay people now. And even if it's the exact same amount, you're giving me $1,000, I'm giving you $1,000. Like, honestly, the energy exchange of just like exchanging money, even among business friends, like, because we want to hire our friends, right? Like I talk about this on the podcast all the time. Like we build no like and trust with people. That's how we run our business so fast. Is like we always say this: we're normal. People like us. They give us money. It's like kind of like our cycle. But I really just believe that like especially if you're gonna hire your friends and you're gonna work in business, like Stacey's a great example. Like we work with Stacey. We do all of her marketing for her businesses. We do her podcast. She's our CFO. We pay her. Like, and she pays us. And that's like, I got her bill. I got up this morning and I paid it. So I think that's a big one because I think it's really easy at the beginning, especially when you're like, I need a Dubsado built, and you're like, well, I can do the copy for your website. I don't know. I just don't know that it's always worth it.
Yeah, I think those things are tough too because especially when you're friends, then it gets kind of complicated. It's like start mixing friends and business a little bit too much, and then when people don't pay for things, they're not as or aren't getting paid. I find they're sometimes not as invested.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to invest in your friends, but I think just approach it with caution and make sure on the front end you have like a lot of expectations set. And I totally agree. I think just paying each other for our services definitely makes sense. And I also loved your point on not like this sounds bad, but like not putting too much trust in people. I think when people are looking for jobs and putting themselves out there, making their resume, making their LinkedIn, they're really trying to like kind of boost themselves up and be confident, but they don't always have the skills that maybe they think they have, or they don't translate the way that they need to be translated for your business. So I think something we did really well early on is actually our idea of doing sample work, which is where when we were hiring social media, because we're hiring social media managers. How much can you really tell from a few Zoom interviews, right? Like when you're just talking to someone, you have to kind of trust them because all you can go on is their word. And so something we implemented early on in our hiring process was actually getting them to do sample work where they create social media posts for our account, and we use that as a gauge to see their talent in action, right? And see like, do they get the messaging? Do they get the branding? What do their skills look like before we enter a relationship with them? Because I find that difficult too. I think like we can get really excited about these things. You get on Zoom with someone, and it feels like a really great connection and natural fit, and you're kind of like you maybe promise a little bit too much, and you get into this relationship, and then you're in it, and then you kind of see some issues or some red flags, and it's harder to backpedal, and it's much easier to find ways to either prevent that totally or catch some things on the front end that you can manage from there.
Totally. Yeah, and I think the other piece too is that when you're building your business, it's like your reputation is on the line, right? So you want to make sure that like no matter like 'cause for us in our situation, what we were building towards was, typically we bring clients on, they work with one of our social media managers, the social media manager does everything. Like we can't have the social media managers be bad. Like that's going to ruin our business. So, and have we had situations where we've hired people and they haven't been great fits and we've found out a bit too late? Yeah. And have we lost clients over that? Yes. And that sucks. And so I think why we did that, and like honestly, this is why like I love sharing tips like this, is because we actually learned from our own mistakes where we were kind of like, well, if we had seen that person's graphics in advance, we never would have hired them. And we actually have no problem. And just so you know, we pay everyone for their sample work. So when they do the work for us, we're not like, oh, like here's the sample work, like now it's ours, he. It's like, no, we'll pay you like as if you were working for us, the hourly rate, like, and and then we pay them and we say thank you so much. We're not a fit, but like all the best. And we give people feedback. We tell them like, maybe why they're not a fit. Sometimes we'll have amazing people join us and we're like, you know what, they're not a fit for an account manager, but they're a great writer and maybe we can use them on show notes, or like there's other ways we want to engage people. We've had people who have been amazing and we've used them as graphic designers, but nothing else. Like, so it's just really about trying to find that fit. But I think with your reputation being on the line, like in a way, when you're building your business, it's like you're either like going to be the person that burns out and does it all, or you are now managing someone else doing it, which is exciting. And like you have to kind of choose your heart.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point because I feel like when we when we first hired and started growing our team, I was like, oh, this is great. Now like all my time is freed up and now I don't have to do any of these things. I don't have to make any posts and do that. And then I started to realize the job now is managing the team, right? Like, and that's actually a full-time job, managing your team. And they need support and they need resources and they need leadership, and there's a reason you're in the position you're in, and they're looking to you for that leadership, right? So if you're in the weeds and writing captions and like doing all these things, then like you don't have the time and space to be supporting the team the way you need to. I think that was a mistake I made a little early on, is continuing to do a lot of the work while we're hiring people and building the team and not investing as much into the team in terms of leadership. And another thing that I think is important is I found it really helpful that when we started hiring people, we had already done their job.
Yes, totally.
So we knew like how long things should take. We knew if someone was billing, 20 hours for something that took us 2 hours, that they were taking advantage of us. Whereas if we hadn't done that role, we might not know some of those things, right? So when you're in the dark and leading people on doing something that you've never done before, I think it can be a little bit more challenging. So that's something I think was helpful in the way that we grew our team. Is it started with just Kristina and I, like we did everything.
Yeah.
And so then when we started bringing people on, it was like very easy to train them because we just trained them ourselves based on how we had done everything. And it was very easy to see where the gaps were. And even when clients had feedback or things like that, it was really easy for us to navigate those conversations because we had done it ourselves.
My last point is kind of this idea of like, nobody is going to, I'm not nobody, I'm going to say rarely do people care about your business as much as you do. And I think it's really hard for us to like place that expectation on people because really like, there's only been a few people we've ever worked with where I'm kind of like, that person really cares. Like they're putting in the hours because they really want to see us be successful, but like they know our success is their success. But like normally people are in it for themselves, which is normal. Like when you go work in a bank, you're not like thinking, oh, is the founder of TD sleeping well? Like, you're not, right? You're working. And so in a small business, it's hard because, you know all the employees and you know all the contractors you work with, and you can tell when people don't care. And I think it's sometimes removing that, like, because I think we would have we would have never hired anybody if we were like concerned about this all the time, because it's so easy to be like, oh my gosh, like, why don't they care? Like, why can't they see the bigger picture? Like, why can't they see the vision? Why can't they see the yacht? But, that's not always the circumstance for everyone. And I think when you're hiring people, you need to remember, like, it's your business. And at the end of the day, you're the one who's going to be taking accountability. And then I think rewarding those who, like, we've worked with so many freelancers, we've worked with so many contractors, we have full-time employees. We really try to, like, pour into the people that see the larger vision and, like, give them the work that they're looking for. Like, we were talking this morning about one of our freelancers that's been with us probably for about 2 years now. And she's amazing. And one of her clients, they had a family tragedy, and she messaged us and was like, hey, would you guys mind sending some flowers over, like, on behalf? I'm happy to organize it. Let me know, whatever. And that was so above and beyond, like, what we could even expect. But what was so amazing about that, it just reminds me of, like, she sees the vision. Like, she sees the vision of how we care for our clients. And so not being offended when people don't, but I think keeping close the people that do.
Such a good point. And I think also for certain roles, it matters less that they, see the vision or like invested in the company and want the growth. And like, maybe if you're looking for someone full time to be like your right hand, your go-to, like that person, is probably important that they're invested in your business. Whereas maybe you're hiring a contractor to do some like copywriting or something like that. It's probably less important that that person's really invested. So I totally agree. I think we can't expect people to be as invested as we are in our businesses. Like, we're the ones that founded it. We are going to be the most invested, but it is nice when you find those people and they care a lot. It's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and chatting with us, because I think this is something that like people are always asking us about. We'd love to hear like what questions you have about scaling a business, and what you have questions about hiring people or whatever. We can bring a hiring expert on, our friend Jackie. But yeah, we're just so grateful for you guys listening, and keep on building your community. Thanks, Maria. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to Community with me, Kristina Bartold, and I'm just so excited to continue the conversations. If you're looking to grow your community and learn more about social, join us at thesocialbusinessclub.ca and use the code podcast to get your first month for $1. Share this episode with your friends and on social, or leave a review. It means the world.